poor immigrant donated your last penny. What happened next will shiver you. Miguel Santos was standing in the bank line, nervously holding the last $27 he had in the world. At 34, he had arrived in the United States for just 3 months, fleeing the violence that had devastated his hometown of El Salvador. Her hands calling for construction work shivered slightly as she filled the international transfer form. The line moved slowly on Friday afternoon at downtown's First National Bank, and Miguel could feel the impatient eyes of other customers. Some whispered English comments that he pretended not to understand, words that cut deeper than any tool that had already handled in the works. The bank's cold air conditioning contrast with the scorching heat outside, where it had spent all day carrying cement bags. "Next," he shouted the box, a middle-aged woman with bored expression and a little plate that said, "Mrs. Henderson, supervisor." Miguel approached the window, his even broken but determined. "Please, I want to send this money to my family." The employee, Mrs. Henderson, looked at him with poorly disadvantaged disdain, her eyes quickly traveling her simple clothes, and the envelope wrinkled in her hands. $27? Seriously? The transfer rate is $15. "I know," Miguel answered, pushing the money through the glass. $12 for my daughter. She's sick and needs medicines." Henderson rolled his eyes dramatically. $12 won't save anyone, dear. Are you wasting your time and mine? Why don't you come back when you have a decent amount? Behind him in line, James Morrison watched the scene with increasing impatience. Executive of a large pharmaceutical corporation, we dressed a suit that cost Miguel's salary more than 3 months. His fingers drummed impactly on the marble counter, while constantly checked his Rolex clock. "Could you accelerate this?" He grunted loudly, his voice loaded with authority and disdain. "Some of us have important work to do, meetings that are worth millions." Miguel turned, finding Morrison's cold eyes. "Sorry, sir. Just a minute." "A minute to transfer exchanges?" Morrison laughed, pulling her expensive phone. "This is pathetic. Go back when you have real money to send. This place is for serious transactions, not for charity." The humiliation burned in Miguel's chest, but he kept the composure. For years at El Salvador, he had faced much worse situations. Armed guerrillas, corrupt police officers, explorers, all had underestimated their resistance. Mrs. Henderson sued the transfer with ill will, stamping the papers with unnecessary force. "Okay, your $12 are on your way," he said, pushing the receipt through the glass without even looking at Miguel. Miguel thanked silently and went to the exit, but stopped listening to Morrison talking loudly on the phone. "Yes, I'm here waiting behind some immigrant sending cents home. These people should understand that this country is for those who have real ambition, not for those who live in charity. That's why our company is right not to hire that type of person," Morrison continued, increasing the tone deliberately for Miguel to hear. "Honest, these immigrants think they can get here and compete with us, as if years of privileged education and family connections could be replaced by manual work." At that moment, something changed in Miguel's eyes. It was not anger, but a silent determination that is born only when someone is underestimated once. He memorized Morrison's face, mentally scored the company's name in the folder he carried, Pharmatech Industries, Mrs. Henderson's identification plate, and walked out with a calm that contrasted with the inner storm. Outside the bench, Miguel stopped for a moment in the shadow of a commercial building, took a deep breath, and pulled a simple phone from his pocket. He dialed an international number and waited. "Dr. Ramirez, it's me, Miguel. Yes, I'm still keeping the profile low as we agreed, but I think it's time to speed up the plans." The voice on the other side answered in Spanish. "Are you sure? Once we start, there's no turning back. After what I just witnessed, I'm more sure than ever. These people need to learn that you can't judge a book by the cover." What neither Henderson nor Morrison knew was that Miguel Santos was not just another desperate immigrant sending exchanges. There were details about their past that remained carefully guarded. Secrets that explained why someone capable of maintaining such composure in the face of humiliation was purposely living with $27 in his pocket, documenting every second of contempt it received. While walking through downtown's busy streets, Miguel smiled for the first time that day. Behind that appearance of manual worker, there was a brilliant mind that was about to teach some very expensive lessons about prejudice and underestimation. If you are enjoying this story of overcoming injustice, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happened after this humiliation will prove that we should never judge someone for appearance, especially when this person carries secrets that can turn the game completely inside out. 3 days passed since humiliation on the bank, and Miguel Santos continued his seemingly normal routine. He woke up at 5 in the morning in his small room in a room in the cheapest neighborhood of the city, had sugar, free black coffee, and went to another day in construction. What his co-workers did not know was that during lunch, Miguel was addressed discreetly to the municipal public library, There, using the free computers, I dived into research that had nothing to do with construction. That Thursday, she typed Pharmatech Industries in the search bar and smiled when she saw the results. Pharmaceutical company with 2.8 billion revenues, which specializes in rare diseases drugs. CEO James Morrison III, graduated from Harvard Business School, took office in 2019 after scandal involving abusive insulin prices. Miguel noted every detail in a beaten notebook, as if it were a detective writing a puzzle. Morrison was not just an arrogant executive, heir to a family who had a profit from the suffering of others for 3 generations. Meanwhile, at Pharmatech's luxurious office, Morrison was in another profit optimization meeting. His assistant, Sarah, went discreetly entered to deliver reports. "Mr. Morrison has arrived a strange correspondence today," she said hesitantly. "A letter without sender, just with your name." Morrison has opened the envelope and found a single sheet of paper with a phrase entered. "Sometimes who you humiliate may be closer than you think." He laughed loudly, drawing the attention of other executives in the room. "Probably some fired employee trying to intimidate me. Play it out." Sarah left the room but kept a copy of the letter. There was something in the simplicity of that message that bothered her deeply. In the bench, Mrs. Henderson was also beginning to feel that something was different. Throughout the week, small strange incidents happened. The bank system crashed whenever it was trying to process international transfers. His mysteriously printers ran out of paint before each shift. And there was that simple-looking man who appeared at the agency every day, always watching, always polite, but never making transactions. "This guy is making me nervous," she murmured to her colleague. "It looks like it's studying everything we do here." What Henderson didn't know was that Miguel was really studying each procedure, each system, each operational weakness. For years working in technology at El Salvador before the Civil War exploded his life, he had learned that every fortress has his vulnerabilities. Just know where to look. That afternoon, Miguel received a call on his simple phone. "Dr. Ramirez here. American universities have confirmed. Your former bank cybersecurity works were accepted for review. When you want to get back to your true professional identity, we have open doors." "Not yet, my friend," Miguel replied in Spanish, watching Pharmatech's building across the street. "First, I need to finish a very important lesson about humility." At the end of that week, Morrison was in his favorite restaurant, a place where a meal cost more than Miguel's monthly salary. He talked excitedly to other executives about the immigrant problem when his phone vibrated. It was an email from an unknown account. "Mr. Morrison, we would like to discuss a business opportunity related to your company. We met at First National Bank next Monday at 14H. An old acquaintance." Morrison showed the email to his colleagues. "Look, even the beggars now want to do business with me. I will appear just to have a little fun." What Morrison didn't realize was that every arrogant word, every gesture of contempt was being carefully documented. Miguel had positioned recording devices in strategic places, collecting evidence of something much larger than simple personal humiliation. In all these days, Miguel also did something that his tormentors would never imagine. He was donating anonymously to families in difficulty, using money that mysteriously appeared in his bank account. Each transfer was accommodation petited from a note, from someone who understands the fight. On Sunday night, Miguel called Dr. Ramirez again. "Tomorrow the second phase begins. Are you sure the team is ready?" "Miguel, they are the best ethical hackers I know. Alumni of yours, by the way. All with the same principles, justice above personal revenge." "Perfect, because the day after tomorrow, James Morrison will find that underestimating people based on appearance is a mistake that can cost much more than he has ever imagined." While Miguel was preparing to sleep in his humble apartment, Morrison slept in his $3 million mansion, completely oblivious to the fact that he had aroused something much more powerful than the anger of a simple immigrant. It had aroused the attention of a brilliant mind that now had a very clear mission: to teach that true wealth is not what you have, but what you are willing to do for others. And what Morrison was about to find out was that some lessons are learned much more expensive than others, especially when you humiliate exactly the wrong person at the exact moment they needed motivation to change not only their own life, but an entire corrupted system. In the early hours of Monday, Miguel was awake 3 hours ago when his phone rang. It was Dr. Ramirez calling San Jose. "Miguel, we got access to Pharmatech servers. You won't believe what we found." The voice sounded tense even through the international line. "They are inflating drug prices at 400% specifically in immigrant communities. There are internal emails calling these people to desperate customers who pay anything." Miguel closed his eyes, feeling a mixture of anger and determination. "And Mrs. Henderson from the bank? Even better. It has a history of 47 complaints for discrimination in the last 2 years, all archived by management. Apparently there is a non-official internal policy of discouraging low-income customers. At 7 a.m., Miguel was in the construction site as always, but this time he carried something more. Hidden between his tools was a discreet tablet, connected to a network that his former academics had established at dawn. "Santos, come here," shouted the foreman. "We have an important customer visiting the work today. I want you and the other immigrants to stay away from the main area. We don't want to give the wrong impression." Miguel nodded silently, but smiled internally. The important client was exactly who he expected it to be. Around 10 a.m., a black BMW stopped in the flower bed. James Morrison got out of the car, adjusting the expensive suit while watching the construction with poor disadvantage. "I was there for a meeting about a new corporate building that Pharmatech intended to build. Make sure we will only use skilled labor," he said loudly to the architect. "I don't want any of these immigrants playing on my company project." Across the flower bed, Miguel discreetly activated the recording system. Each word of Morrison was being captured in high definition. During lunch, while Morrison had lunch in her air-conditioned car, Miguel received a message from Sarah, Morrison's assistant. She had decided to collaborate after witnessing months of discriminatory behavior. "I have access to his emails," said the message. "There are correspondence with other executives planning to increase drug prices just in the areas where you live. They call it a profit strategy in vulnerable markets." Miguel answered quickly, "I need you to save everything. We're setting up a much larger case than Morrison imagines." That afternoon, Miguel did something unexpected. He appeared on the bench during peak hours, wearing his dusty work clothes, carrying a shabby leather paste that seemed completely out of place in his hands. Mrs. Henderson saw him and rolled his eyes. "Don't tell me you have another $27 to send?" "In fact," Miguel answered calmly, "I came to make a different transfer today." He opened the folder and removed an official document. "I would like to transfer $2.8 million to an international charity account." Henderson almost choked. "Is this some kind of joke?" Miguel slid a bank statement through the glass that showed exactly that amount in his account. "It's no joke, and I would also like to talk to the manager about the discriminatory policies of this agency." The movement caught the attention of other employees. The manager, Mr. Williams, quickly approached, seeing the numbers in the document. "Mr. Santos, please come to my room. Mrs. Henderson, can you give us a moment?" While following the manager, Miguel heard Henderson mutter to a colleague, "How is it evil? He was here last week with $27. In the manager's room, Miguel went straight to the point. "I have recordings of employees of this agency discriminating on appearance and origin-based customers. I also have documentation of 47 similar complaints that have been deliberately ignored." The manager paled. "Mr. Santos, if there is any misunderstanding—" "There is no misunderstanding," Miguel interrupted, connecting his tablet to a small speaker. "Would you like to hear?" Mrs. Henderson's voice echoed through the room. $12 will not save anyone, dear. He is wasting his time and mine." Meanwhile, Morrison was in his office when he received a disturbing call. "Mr. Morrison? Here is from Pharmatech's compliance department. We received an anonymous complaint about discriminatory price practices. SEC wants a complete investigation." "This is ridiculous," Morrison exploded. "Who would dare to report our company?" "Apparently someone with access to very specific internal emails. And Mr. Morrison, the press was also contacted." That night, Miguel was in his simple apartment when Dr. Ramirez called again. "Miguel, things are moving faster than we expected. 3 TV channels want interviews. The Justice Department has opened a federal investigation. And there is more." "What?" "We found that Morrison and Henderson have financial connections. She gets bonuses by filtering unwanted customers of the bank's corporate accounts. It's a systemic scheme." Miguel looked out the window of his modest apartment for the city's lights. Somewhere outside, Morrison slept in his mansion, completely oblivious to the fact that the poor immigrant he had humiliated had 3 university diplomas, had been a cybersecurity consultant for international banks, and was now coordinating an operation that would expose years of systematic discrimination. "Dr. Ramirez," Miguel said calmly, "I think it's time to reveal who I really am. Tomorrow, Morrison will find out that humiliating someone based on appearance can be the most expensive mistake of your life." What Morrison and Henderson did not know that they were about to become the perfect example of how prejudice and arrogance can destroy everything someone built, especially when you underestimate exactly the wrong person, just as they need motivation to transform years of academic knowledge into practical and devastatingly effective justice. On Tuesday morning, Morrison arrived at the office finding a real pandemonium. Reporters surrounded the Pharmatech building. TV cameras were positioned at the main entrance, and his secretary Sarah awaited him with an expression that mixed panic and something that seemed satisfaction. "Mr. Morrison, we need to talk urgently," she said, holding a bulky folder. "The story has leaked. All media are reporting. Morrison tore off the newspaper from her hands. The headline has hit him as a punch. Pharmaceutical executive humiliates immigrant that donated last penny. Man proves to be a former university teacher with 3 diplomas. His photo was stamped on the first page, along with an image of Miguel in academics, receiving an International Cybersecurity Award. The caption was devastating. Dr. Miguel Santos, a specialist in bank technology, pretended to be a manual worker to document systematic discrimination. This cannot be happening, Morrison murmured, his hands shaking slightly. Like this immigrant managed. He is not just an immigrant, Mr. Morrison, Sarah interrupted, his voice loaded with a coldness he had never noticed before. Dr. Miguel Santos has a doctorate in computer science by Stanford, a master's degree in economics from the National Universidad of El Salvador, and is an internationally recognized specialist in banking and pharmacist systems. Morrison's phone rang incessantly. He was the chairman of the Pharmatech Council. Morrison, you destroyed our company. Government contracts were suspended, shares plummeted 67% in 2 hours, and the Justice Department is confiscating our servers right now. Meanwhile, at First National Bank, Mrs. Henderson watched the vans of the press parked outside the window. Manager Williams had just informed her that he was being fired for just cause after the recordings of his discriminatory interactions were reproduced on all news channels. How could I know? She murmured to herself, packing her personal belongings. He looked so common. At Pharmatech, Morrison watched horrified while federal agents carried document boxes from his office. Sarah approached him one last time. Mr. Morrison, there is something you need to know. During the last 6 months, Dr. Santos contacted me ending a unique opportunity, documenting within the discriminatory practices of the company. I accepted. Morrison felt her legs weakened. Were you working with him? Every prejudiced email you sent, every discriminatory comment you made at meetings, every racist policy you implemented, everything was documented and sent directly to his legal team. Sarah smiled for the first time in months, including that email where you wrote that immigrants should be grateful for any price we charge your medicines. That afternoon, Dr. Miguel Santos first appeared in public using his real name and credentials. The press conference was held at the public library where he had conducted his research, a symbolism that did not go unnoticed. For 3 months, I lived as millions of immigrants live daily in this country, explained Miguel, his calm but firm voice. It was not an academic experiment. It was a necessity. When I arrived here, I needed to rebuild my life from scratch, but I also wanted to understand how the systems that keep people in vulnerable situations. A reporter asked, Dr. Santos, why did you specifically choose Pharmatech and that bank? I didn't choose, they chose, Miguel answered with a discreet smile. When you systematically observe how certain institutions treat people based only on appearance, it discovers very revealing patterns. Morrison and Henderson simply perfectly exemplified a much greater problem. The data Miguel presented were devastating. Pharmatech's internal emails showing deliberate policies to surcharge medications in immigrant communities. Bank recordings showing systematic discrimination against low-income customers. Financial connections between the two institutions that suggested a coordinated exploration scheme. The money I transferred to the bank, Miguel continued, it came from a background that I specifically created to help immigrant families who cannot pay abusive drug prices. Each penny Pharmatech has profited by exploring these communities is being returned to them. Morrison watched the press conference of his apartment after being escorted out of the company's building. His bank account was frozen, his reputation destroyed, and the lawyers had already reported that he would face at least 47 individual processes for discrimination. The most ironic thing was that Miguel had donated exactly $2.8 million, the same amount that Morrison won annually exploring the processes that now processed it. Revenge, Miguel has concluded in the press conference, is not doing to others what they did to you. It is building a system where what they did to you can no longer happen to anyone. While Miguel spoke, Henderson watched his small apartment, where he now lived after losing his home in a loan he could no longer pay. Morrison was in his law firm, desperately trying to find some cool breach that saved him from complete ruin. Both now understood that they had severely underestimated not just a man but an entire movement he represented. Miguel had not only been avenged, had exposed and dismantled a whole system of oppression that worked for decades in the shadow, fed by the arrogance of people who believed that appearance determined human value. The question that remained in the air, while federal investigations deepened and more companies were implicated in the scandal, was whether other institutions would learn the lesson before more poor immigrants revealed to have doctorates, international connections, and the determination necessary to turn humiliation into systemic justice. 6 months after the exhibition that shook the country, Miguel Santos was sitting on his new office on the 42nd floor of a skyscraper in Manhattan. The plate at the door said, Dr. Miguel Santos, Director of Digital Justice and Financial Inclusion. The call that changed everything had arrived a week after the press conference. Dr. Santos, here is Jennifer Walsh, Goldman Sachs CEO. We would like to hire him to revolutionize our service protocols and create a new department of bank ethics. The irony was delicious. The poor immigrant who had been humiliated for transferring $27 now supervising policies to the world's largest investment bank. His first decision was to implement the Santos Protocol, a system that automatically monitored discriminatory interactions in all bank branches in the country. Any caught employee demonstrating appearance or origin-based prejudice received mandatory training on diversity. Serious cases resulted in immediate dismissal. Mrs. Henderson discovered this in the worst possible way. After being fired from First National, he got a job in a Bianco Minor, where it was caught by the new system discriminating a Mexican client. The video went viral with the hashtag Nunca Mais Henderson, and it became the national example of how not to treat customers. I didn't know, she muttered to reporters who found her working as a receptionist in a veterinary clinic, the only job she got after the scandal. If I knew who he was, but that's exactly the point, the reporter answered. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat him with dignity. James Morrison faced an even more dramatic destination. Pharmatech was sold by a fraction of its original value after investigations revealed decades of discriminatory practices. Morrison lost everything. The mansion, the luxury cars, even her golf club account was canceled. He now worked as the insurance salesman, trying to rebuild a reputation that had been completely destroyed. His old social connections avoided him, and former executives pretended not to recognize him as they intersecting on the street. The worst moment came when Morrison needed medicines for her own daughter, who developed diabetes. The price that new Pharmatech owners charged for the medicines that his former company produced was exactly the same as he had imposed on immigrant communities. Now I understand, he murmured to his wife, holding the medical account that he would consume 3 months of his new salary. Now I understand how these families felt. Miguel, in turn, used his new position to create the Foundation $27, an organization that offered microcreeds and financial support for entrepreneurial immigrants. The name was an ironic tribute to the last dollars that had transferred that fateful day. Every dollar we donated represents an unlisted story, Miguel explained in an interview with CNN. It represents someone who was underestimated, humiliated, but still maintained dignity and hope. Dr. Ramirez visited Miguel in his new office, smiling as he saw how the simple apartment had been replaced by a coverage overlooking Central Park. You got it, said the old friend. Not only has it taken revenge, but it changed a whole system. Revenge was just the beginning, Miguel replied, looking out the window to the city that he had once received with contempt. The real award was to prove that human dignity is priceless, and that underestimating someone based on appearance is always an expensive mistake. Sarah, the former assistant of Morrison, now worked as a human resources director at the Miguel Foundation. Do you know what impresses me most? She said during a meeting. You could have destroyed Morrison completely, but you chose to build something better. The best revenge, Miguel smiled, is not destroying his enemy. It is building a world where people like him can no longer cause the evil they have caused. Today, the Santos Protocol is used in over 3,000 U.S. financial institutions. Miguel's story became a movie, book, and inspired a generation of immigrants to never accept discrimination silently. Morrison and Henderson have become case studies in business schools on how prejudice can destroy careers and entire companies. Your stories are told as examples of what happens when you underestimate someone based only on appearance. Miguel never had to pretend to be poor but kept the habit of wearing simple clothes when visiting banks, personally testing if his protocols were working. Invariably, the service was impeccable. The fear of becoming the next Henderson had created a silent revolution in the financial system. The lesson that echoed far beyond a simple downtown bank was crystal clear. Never judge someone for its appearance, because you never know if you are humiliating exactly the person who has the knowledge, connections, and determination needed to transform your arrogance into your own ruin. Miguel has learned that true revenge is not to return the damage suffered. It is achieving the success that your enemies could never imagine, and to use that success to ensure that no one else goes through what you have gone through. If this story of overcoming has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that human dignity always triumphs about prejudice, and that sometimes karma only needs a little help from those who have the courage to transform humiliation into revolution.